Okay, I've got the front off the car, and that proved to be a bit of a struggle yesterday. So the next thing I'm going to do is get the water out of the radiator. Now, you need to undo this. Now on mine, this is extremely stiff, and you actually need 2 hands to get that out. So I'll just pull it out with 2 hands. Oh, can't do that otherwise. Oh, right, the drain point isn't in the radiator itself, but it's in the fixing on the back of it. Right, looking from the side, there's a plastic fitting here that goes in the back of the rad, and then if you were looking from the under the car, you can see that's the drain point. Right, this is the drain plug, and it's made out of a very soft plastic, and I didn't have a very wide screwdriver, so I've used a flat plate of metal to undo it, and then you can get an ordinary screwdriver in there to actually turn it. It's very stiff. Now, that's all very brown, and you might think, oh, it's because it's rusty. No, it's brown because I had to buy orange coolant. That's all they had in the garage. I really hate orange coolant, it makes everything look rusty. I'm just taking off the bonnet catch because that holds in the air dam, and I'm pretty sure that I'm going to have to lift the radiator up in order to get it out. So that just comes off, 6 bolts, and I think that will just pull out forward, and then that gives me a bit of clearance across the top of the radiator to lift it up, because I've noticed that the radiator in front of it is the air conditioning radiator, and it's held on plastic hooks, so I'm going to have to lift the radiator up to get it off those plastic hooks. Right, the cross member, this goes right across the car and holds it on. It's held in with 4 bolts into captive nuts. These 3 look like they're going to undo. This one is already rounded. They're 13mm sockets, so I'm going to try hammering a 12mm socket on. But first I'm going to give this one a good heating up with the old kitchen caramelliser. This is a kitchen caramelliser. I borrowed off my mum. And I can use that to burn off all the rust and hopefully loosen these nuts up. Wire brush all the crap off at the end of it. Hopefully this will make it easier to undo. The bracket that they connect to is actually made out of tinsel, and it's deforming as I'm undoing it. See? Okay, so that end's undone. We can see that all swings on there, which is pretty interesting. Right, I'm on the last bolt, and it's at the back. That's quite hot because I've been heating it up. So I've got to get my caramelliser in there, heat that bolt up, and hopefully this cross member will then drop off. This side is much more difficult because all these pipes are in the way. Yeah, it's a brilliant bit of design. In fact, I look at the front of this car and I just think, why didn't they bolt this cross member on instead of welding it on? That would have been so much easier, because you could have had the cross member off and everything would have been easy to do. Okay, so that end is now undone. We can see that the whole assembly can move now. So, woo. Basically, it's only the pipes holding it in place now. So that's the cross member that holds the radiator up. And you can see it's pretty rusty. And these screws are the ones I could not get out. And what I actually did was I used the angle grinder to heat that up as much as I could and just pull the moulding across where it melted it. So I've got to repair that, but I've got to get these out because they're actually an integral part of the structure and it has to go back together. pretty lucky with that one. Okay, the radiator's now dropped down and it can be moved around. It's got these padding pieces in, and these are all really desiccated, so it's pretty unlikely they're going to go back in. And there's one on the top and there's some in the bottom, so I'm going to just take those out. Well, the air conditioning radiator, which is this one in front, and the oil cooler appears to be held on this bracket with one screw to the radiator, so that needs to be undone. And there's brackets obviously at both ends. There's the other one. They look as rusty as hell as well, don't they? Well, that's an 8mm socket, and I actually had to bang the socket on with a big hammer because it's rusted, but it has undone, so it looks like it's gone into a plastic socket. Okay, once those two brackets are off, this just falls down, and it can only fall that far, but I think I'll find something to secure that so it can't fall down. Right, I've just made a hook to hold that in position, and that's just an old coat hanger. Right, the bottom hose, where the drain point is, goes into this plastic terminal, and this has got a wire clip securing it. I've actually never seen one of these before, so I'm going to have to work out how to undo it. Okay, well that proved to be very difficult. The unit itself here, you have to take the wire all the way off, and then there's these little flanges on the back of it that you can use to prise it off with, and it just pops off. It doesn't seem to have any sealant, so there must be an O-ring in there. And what I did was I dropped the radiator down as far as I could get it so that this was below the spar, and then prised it off. It didn't look as though it was going to come, and then it suddenly just popped off. Perhaps it's cleverer than it looks. Right, the overflow hose is off, and all I did was grab hold of it with a pair of long nose pliers, compress that, push it across, and then push it off with a screwdriver. The bigger one's going to be more challenging. The clip for the top hose, which is here, is put on from the bottom, so I can't get hold of it. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to take the battery off, which I was trying to avoid, because obviously when the battery's not on the car, you can't lock the car at night. So if you're going to do this, make sure you've got your radio code. Right, I've jacked the radiator back up to the top in order to get the top hose off. Otherwise you just can't get at it. Right, I've taken the battery out, and using these really long nose pliers I've managed to get hold of this and undo it. But it was a real bastard of a job. It's taken me nearly 15 minutes of trying to do that. This thing is really hard to get hold of because it's underneath, and it's really stiff, and I mean, I'm quite strong, but that was a real struggle. Now that the top hose is off, the only thing holding it in position are 4 clips that connect to the back of the fans, and you can see the locator there, and you just pop them and the radiator drops down. And what I've done is, so it didn't drop down and smash itself in a big heap, is I've put my bucket just in the right place, and now I should just be able to drop the thing out of the bottom. It's quite a scrappy way of doing things because everything seems to be in the way, but it is working. Right, I've hung the fan assembly on a piece of wire, and I've hung the air conditioning radiator on a piece of wire, and now I need to feed the new radiator up between them. Right, I've got to the point where I've slid the radiator up between the air conditioning radiator and the fan assembly, and I've managed to get them to connect together. The air conditioning radiator has a clip here that you have to push it up into, and then it's fastened at the bottom with this bracket. So once you can get it in, get that bracket in, and then there's another bracket and another slide clip on the other side. And once that's in, it can't fall out. The fan assembly seemed to me to be extremely difficult to get in. It has two clips down the bottom, you can just see them at the bottom there, that have to clip in. At the top here, I'm sure this bracket went over the original one, but there is no way that's going over this replacement radiator, so that can just act as a spacer. I don't think it's making that much difference. Well, I've spent nearly an hour trying to get this top hose on, and it's mostly because I cannot get the original clip to go back on. So what I've done is I've got an oversized Jubilee clip, and I've put that on, tightened it down with a screwdriver, and now I've got this. I can just tighten this right down as tight as it's going to go, and hopefully that'll be good enough. I should also be able to get at it from the back of the car if I have to do this again, but I'm not counting on it. The bottom hose connector here, well, that's just clicked into place rather satisfyingly, so I think I just need to fight the wire clip back onto it, which goes on that way round. It's probably not a one-handed job, but it doesn't look too difficult to get that one. Clip's just pinged straight back in. I just pushed it straight up and it went straight in, so I might have been lucky there. Right, I've put the overflow pipe in, which has still got its original spring clip, which is much easier to operate than the other one. So now I think I'm ready just to put the spar back on at the bottom, and it's back in place. Well, this spar is pretty rusty, so I've burnt most of the paint off it, wire brushed it, and I'm just going to give it a go with wax oil before I put it back on the car, prolong its life a bit. I'm just using a jack just to get the assembly up into position. Right, the support bar is back on, 4 bolts at either end. These are really rusty when I took them off, so I've gone over them with the heat gun and then coated them in copper-ease, and they've all gone back on, which is a saving grace because I didn't know how I was going to get some bolts in time to actually do this. So the next thing to do is put the battery back on the car. Right, I'm just going to have a go at hanging the bumper on and see if I can do it on my own. Well, not quite so easy as it looks. There's a plastic moulding here and here that corresponds with slots on the bodywork, so you have to pull it out and ping it in. It's not that difficult. There's where it bolts through. So I've done up the nuts that are on the inside of the bodywork, and I've also remembered to reconnect the fog light connector and push the red tag back into its correct position. This section is proving to be quite awkward. I need to fight everything into the correct position. I think this is probably in the wrong place at the moment, but right, it's a question of getting them in the right order. The bigger plate is on the top, the bottom plate slips underneath and comes over the top, and then it all just drops together really easily. This one's a bit of a devil to undo because you can't really get a screwdriver on, you have to get a cranked screwdriver on there. Right, I've got the wheels back on, so the very last thing to do for me is to put the air dam back on. This just pushes in place. I've just quickly sprayed over the bonnet catch to make it look a bit better than it did, and then that's the last bit of the job.